Hello, and welcome to the channel. You know how cartoons would randomly zoom in and hit you with one of those 4K ultra realistic detailed shots of the character's face? Well, I lived for that growing up. So today marks the beginning of a whole new series where I take our favorite 90s and early 2000s cartoons that we all grew up with and make them real. And up first on the list of defilement is everyone's favorite candy-loving salty sea captain, Captain K'nuckles. I started off this build with a large piece of aluminum foil that I then mashed down into a thumb shape before covering it in a large skin flap and smoothing that bad boy down. I then go ahead and proceed to put his eyeballs in their proper positions. These are just made up of a pre-baked ball that I cut in half. Next, we're going to start on his upper eyelids. We get skin flaps that we then slice into the proper eyelid shape.
Slice.
I then take my medium-sized ball stylus and slide that bad boy across his lids. Then we got to make up his lower lid by doing the same exact thing. I used a little rubber wedge tool here to kind of push it underneath the lid a little bit better. Up next, we take a little piece of tapeworm that we're then going to put underneath the eye. We're going to build up those lower bags because K'nuckles be bagged up for sure. I use that soft wedging tool again to give it a little bit of texture. We're going to go ahead and set that aside, and we're going to start on his big ol' schnoz. This thing is nasty looking. I don't know what they're... Yeah, so I roll out a little teardrop shape, and then I put a dent in it. And then I use my little rubber sculpting tool to kind of add some wrinkles, and I blend that into the rest of the nose. Going to do a little form check, and nasty, but that's what we're looking for. I went ahead and took his nose off, that way it's not in the way when I start to add all this texture around his eyeballs. More texture the better with these kind of things. I'm using my small ball stylus here to emphasize his crow's feet, and then I use little pieces of tapeworm to really bring them out and make them pop a little bit more. And then I blend those into the rest of his face. Went ahead and popped his nose back on really fast, and then we could start on his mouth. At this point, I wasn't entirely sure what I wanted his mouth to look like. I ended up settling for a kind of a snarl frown. I added a tiny little chunk of clay, which is going to be his chin, and then I added pieces of tapeworm around the mouth slit to make up his lips. Up next, I pinch off a loaf of clay that I then place around the side of his mouth, and I begin to smooth that in. While I smooth that out, you guys should leave a comment down below letting me know who you would like to see me make next. I have a list of some I want to do, but I would love to hear your input and make who you would like to see. It was at this point that I realized I wanted to make the mouth stretch across the entire face instead of just being a little side smirk. So I went ahead and did the exact same thing on the other side. And with the basic structure of his mouth complete, I could put his nose back on, and we could start building up that chest. Take a fat loaf of clay and rub that across his chest, smoothing it out with my ball stylus, until I get something that looks like this. With the main structure of him done, it is now time for my favorite part, adding in all of those little details. Like I said before, more detail the better. So we're really going to emphasize these wrinkles here. I don't really have too much of a plan when it comes to this. I'm kind of just adding things as I see fit. Little moles and warts and pores, really trying to make them look weathered. One of my favorite skin texture techniques is I take my small ball stylus and I gently wipe it across the surface. It gives it kind of a leathery look, and I feel like it's perfect for him. Kind of looking at this right now, I'm realizing he kind of looks like Jabba the Hutt mixed with a Muppet, and I'm kind of loving it. Next, we're going to start on his shirt. We start off with a large skin flap that we wrap around and then smooth it out on the back, and then we cut off the excess using my X-Acto knife. I then blend the rest using my finger into the bottom of his body. Take this little stabby tool and I poke and prod at the top of the shirt to give it a little bit of a worn texture. I then take a piece of skin flap and I lay this on the front. This is going to be the front panel of his jacket. Rip off the excess clay, but I leave a little bit to have a little bit of an overhang. I then take my big ball stylus and smooth that out. I then repeat the same exact process on the other side. I then go along that overhang with some tweezers and kind of pull little chunks of clay off, giving it a torn look on the bottom. Off camera, I went ahead and cut out the lapels on the front of his jacket, trimmed off the bottom. Then I get my little poking tool and I start to roughen up this jacket. Now that his clothes are nice and weathered, I can start to add the little pockets on his jacket. I take a half circle and I put it on the side, and I use my little poking tool to add little dots along the side indicating stitching. And then it's off to the oven for its first bake. Once back from the oven, I give him that flick test just to indicate that it's actually baked, and it's onto his hat. Off camera, I cut out this little piece of cardboard, which is going to be the front and back panel of the hat. I'm going to use this as a stencil. I'm going to carve around it. I actually end up keeping the cardboard connected to the clay. This helped keep the form of the bend in the oven so it didn't lose its shape and flatten out. I take the grippy part of my X-Acto knife, trying not to slice the inside of my hand while I do this. I roll that back and forth to give it some texture, then onto the oven. I did actually end up giving it a lot more texture before I put it in the oven. I just did that off camera really quick, and then I super glued those two ends together. As you can see, the two ends didn't quite line up, so I'm going to use some Milliput, which I've actually never used before, so I ended up cutting off a lot more than I actually needed. But this stuff worked great. I just cut it off, mixed it together, and then I applied it to the end and kind of shaped into the shape I wanted. It definitely was way softer than the clay I was using, but as it hardened, I was able to give it a little bit more detail and texture. I went to get a progress shot, and that's when I realized I totally forgot to film me making the boots. Honestly, I don't even really remember me making them at all, but here they are. Now that the main bulk of the body is complete, it's time to work on his arms. Start by rolling off a log of clay that I then flatten one end and taper off the other. I then take a piece of skin flap that is going to make up the cuff of his sleeve. I then took my ball stylus and mashed it into the end to help hide the hands a little bit. Once I was happy with the size, I went ahead and attached it to the body via ball stylus. Carried on that same texture that I added to the jacket using my X-Acto knife. Now that he's sleeved up, I could go ahead and put this in the oven and we can start working on his hands. Caption K'nuckles kind of has these robot looking hands. I tried like 6 different ways on making these, but I found the best one being this. I found these little earring studs that I then attached these little pre-baked robot looking fingers to the end using super glue. And all I had to simply do was attach them to the end of the arms, and just like that, the main build is complete and we can move on to his paint job. We first start off with that classic K'nuckles blue. This is just cadmium blue and a little bit of white paint mixed together. Once I let the paint fully dry, I then can apply a red wash to his cheeks, chin, and ears. I feel like this really makes it look more alive compared to the cartoon where he's obviously just straight blue. I also add a darker bluish red tone to his lips and eye bags. And up next we got his big old nose. We start off by giving it a yellow base coat and then a orange wash that we start from the top and kind of let it gradient lighter down. Then onto his eyes. I used an off-white color for this. I just think it looked more natural compared to just straight white. It took a ton of coats to cover it. It's really translucent paint. As for his shirt, it gets pretty much the same color as his eyes, except it's a little bit warmer, and then I went ahead and sponged on some of that actual white color onto his belly to give it a little bit more of a highlight. And then it's on to painting the orange stripes that go across his shirt. And with the shirt complete, then we can start on K'nuckles' signature red jacket. Give the entire thing a base coat of this vermilion red, making sure I get it in all the nooks and crannies. And then onto his hat, which gets the same exact red. And while all that dries, I go ahead and get my smallest ball stylus and give him his little black pupils. K'nuckles wouldn't be a dirty pirate without some dirt, so I went ahead and made up a black wash, which I then brush over the entire surface, letting it pull up in all of the detail. This is actually probably my favorite part when it comes to painting. I feel like it just ties all the colors in together and gives it a more unison look. Now that I covered the entire surface with that black wash, it's time to start on his boots. They're getting the basic black boot paint job, just solid black paint. And with the paint job complete, there's only one thing left, and that is giving him his signature bushy eyebrows. For this, I wanted to use actual hair, well, maybe not actual hair, fake actual hair, but hair nonetheless. I cut little tufts of hair off and then super glued those to his eyelids. For the base, I went pretty simple on it. I just used a square foam piece that I then covered the entire surface with little chunks of coffee stir. My goal with this is I was trying to make it look like he was walking on a dock. After I was happy with how it looked, I went along the surface with my X-Acto knife and kind of scraped up the surface to give it a weathered texture. And to finish it off, I used a wood finish and just applied that over the entire surface, giving it a generous coat. And with that, you all could feast your eyes upon those glorious glamour shots. And there you have it, folks. Captain K'nuckles looking rougher than ever, just the way he likes it. If you enjoyed watching me bring this salty mess to life, don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what cartoon nightmare I should sculpt next. And with that, I'll see you next time.